barn door there. Hey guys, welcome back to Dan's Pro Shop. Today, I don't have the most exciting of events, but this is a necessity of life. Today, we are simply doing an LOF on the family truckster here. You may be asking yourself, what the heck is an LOF? That's a lube oil filter for those of you that may not know. I know this is not the most exciting thing in the world. However, we've all had to do our own oil change for the first time at some point in our life. Whether you were 8 years old or 58 years old. At some point, hopefully, you found yourself doing this on your own. So, think about that. Put this information out there for somebody that may be looking for, the step-by-step on how to do the normal everyday things. And that's kind of half the purpose of this channel. It's not all crazy out there stuff. Sometimes you just need to know the normal stuff. So let's get into this thing and see what it's all about. Well guys, in case you missed it on the title of the video, this is a 2013 Honda Accord EXL. That's just the submodel, doesn't really matter. But I mean, well, sometimes it does. Like this one has a larger rear disc because of the L. But we're not concerned about that right now. We are simply doing a blood transfusion on the old power barn here. So the first and arguably the most important part of this procedure, other than remembering to put oil back in it when you're done, but we'll get there, is to run this thing for a little while. Let it get up to operating temperature. Go do your honey-do list, run to Home Depot, do whatever you need to do. But get this thing up hot and operating temp. That way, whenever we drain the oil, it gets all the crap out of the heads, all the oil passages, everything. It comes out. If you do this cold, you're just draining the stuff that's in the pan. And it's, okay, yeah, there's fresh oil in there, but you're missing half the point here. So do yourself a favor and just get it warm. So let's get this thing up off the ground so we can get our dad gut underneath the core support here. Now, I know you guys are probably giggling at my outfit here, but hey, it's the weekend. Don't judge me. I wear boots 90% of the time, so high socks are just kind of what I got. But hey, I digress. Go ahead, throw the floor jack under here. I know some of you guys might be freaking out right now. Hey Dan, use the pinch weld. I promise you, the front of this thing has a tow hook here on this front cross member. So this thing was designed and built to carry its own weight from this member. And I've owned this car since new, and I have done this procedure every 3,500 miles since it was new. So I promise you this works. And not to mention, I can't put the jack under the pinch welds because that's where the jack stands go. See, we're getting there. So we'll get this thing up far enough, make it a little easy on us. All right, that seems satisfactory. Now let's put some life-saving devices under this thing. Trust me, don't forget that step. Got two of my favorite Craftsman 3-ton stands here. Yeah, back in the day when you got it from Sears, these things will probably get buried with me. I've had them forever. Numero uno. And numero dos. Now that we've got everything all set up, just back off the jack here, all nice and easy. And there you go. Now everything's all good and safe, and we got plenty of room to get our gut in there. Now another thing I like to do is once we have this thing up, before we actually put our head under there, give this thing a good wiggle. Make sure it's not going to come down on you. And if you're doing this on a lift, same thing. You put the pads under the pinch welds, get it about, 2-3 inches off the ground, just so the suspension is relaxed and nothing's touching the ground. Shake it. If it's going to fall, make sure you're not under it when it does. Go ahead and grab our trusty creeper, because those days of laying on the concrete are far beyond. grab us a drain pan and a 17 mil. Because 95% of the Hondas that I've run across, the drain pan is always a 17 mil. So it may not be the same for yours, but if you're doing this one, it is. Let's slide our pan under here. Now bear in mind, like I was preaching at the beginning, half of the point of this thing is you got to get it warm. So just be ready for that. Good Lord. What did Kurt Angle put this thing on here last time? Yeah! Yeah. That's why I tell you to shake the car first. Because you don't want the first shake to be that while your head is right under the A-arm. Now do yourself a favor and set the pan up behind it. Because this stuff has velocity. It's not going to come straight out. Now when you get to the end here, these last couple threads, keep some tension on it, tilt it up like so, then yank. That helps minimize the collateral damage there. Yeah, you're still going to get some, but yeah, it is what it is. Now I know this is only 4.5 quarts here, but you see how quickly this drained? Not only because we got this thing up to operating temperature and it's flowing a lot better, but up top on the valve cover, you loosen the valve cap or the oil fill cap, if not take it all the way off. That releases the vacuum inside of the crankcase and allows air to rush in while the oil is rushing out. That just really speeds up this whole process. Now once your pan's pretty well good and drained, you're just going to get a little bit of dribble here. And I mean, you could wait till Kingdom Come for that to stop. But once the majority of it's out, you're good. Go ahead and clean up your drain plug. Make sure there's no gunk on it and everything. Make sure that the crush washer is on here and in good shape. Once everything's all good to go, simply reinstall and crank that thing down. Now you don't want to crush this thing, like you saw me struggle to take this thing off, because heat cycles expand and contract different materials like metal and aluminum. So this thing, just like the oil filter that we'll get here to in a minute, you don't want to kill this thing by tightening it, because if you do that, you will have to kill yourself to get this thing off. So you want it to be tight, secure, and snug, but not like slammed down till you're dead. Now moving on to the oil fill tray. Thank you, Honda engineers, for making this thing super miserable to get to. Not only is it right next to the head pipe and the first cat here, but there's like this cutout in the pan here that's just like miserable to get to. So, I mean, you can use something like this or one of those like weird socket adapters or a band wrench, or heck man, if you got those meat hooks good enough, maybe you can try to do this by hand. But more often than not, you're probably not going to get this off by hand. So I just like these ones. These are my particular favorite because they're small, they're handy, they get in most places. If you're interested, check out the description for a link. Simply just get a bite on this thing. See if we can't loosen her up, just like so. Now once you get it so far with the wrench, you don't need it no more. Make sure you got your pan in place. Just start running it off. Now, unfortunately, this is going to make a mess. There is not much you can do to avoid it because it runs down the frame rail here and these stupid guards. And unless you take all this stuff off, that's really just unavoidable. But unfortunately, this is just part of the process, so you kind of got to deal with it. We'll take our time with a rag and some brake cleaner when we're done here, make sure it's all nice and tidy. Now, once the filter gets to that same like dripping point as we had with the pan, just keep on unscrewing it. Like I said, you're going to get messy. You can wear gloves if you'd like to, but yeah, that's up to you. Keep on unscrewing it until you get to the last thread. Believe me, you'll feel it. This thing will get increasingly loose, and just pull it off. Drain the excess in the pan there. Just let it sit and drain. Now get yourself up in here and clean up the mating surface where the gasket on the new oil filter is going to go. Heck, even take advantage of this room and get in here and clean up the oil from the old oil filter. Because once the new filter's in here, we're not going to have room to access this area. So take a minute, have a little pride in your work, clean up as you're going. It's so much easier now than trying to do it all at the end. So now that we have the surface all prepped, ready to go, grab us a new oil filter. Just happen to have this guy on the shelf. The part number for this one is B1402. This just happens to be a Baldwin filter because my local parts store carries Baldwin, and these things are amazing filters. Now this part may be controversial, but this is what I do. Take you just a little bit of the old oil that came out, just a little bit on your finger there, and rub it on the gasket of the new oil filter. Some people say you got to use new. Come on, we're not doing brain surgery here. You just need to make sure that this gasket is wetted. Because like I said earlier, whenever you crank this thing on and the engine runs and gets hot, this thing gets increasingly more difficult to get off next time. If you forget to lube this gasket, you will never get it off. You're going to end up poking holes in this thing with screwdrivers and cranking it off with vice grips. And yeah, trust me, it gets bad. So make sure that you pre-lube this filter gasket here. Now, we crank this thing in, spin it all the way up by hand, and tighten it by hand. Do not use a wrench to tighten an oil filter, or a fuel filter for that matter. Just go until it's tight, snug, and comfortable. Just like we did with the drain plug, do the same thing with the oil filter. Do it by hand, and that's it. Now I got us some carbon choke cleaner here. We'll just hose down the area that got bled on. Because the last thing you want to see after doing an oil change is a puddle of oil in the driveway the following morning. That doesn't necessarily mean that you made a mistake and forgot to do something, but it could be all the extra oil laying in all these little passages and everything, and then it just leaks out overnight. So no sense in giving yourself that heart attack for no reason. Now that we are all buttoned up underneath the car, let's get back on top. This step here is crucial. And you would be amazed at how many people I see forget to do this. You know, you're in a rush, you're just excited to be doing the project or whatever you're doing. You cannot, well, I mean, you can, but you should not refill the engine while the car is up on jack stands like this. Unless you have it on a lift or like 4 jack stands where this thing is flat, then it's okay. But we need to get this thing back down on the ground and level. That way, the reading on the dipstick is accurate. I mean, obviously, if you know the capacity that goes in here, it's not that big of a deal. But honestly, if you're doing something, do it right and just get in the habit of doing it that way. So we'll jack this thing up, get it off the stands, and back on the ground. Let everything back down nice and slow. Easy does it. Now we're back on the ground, all safe, and everything is at a nice, comfortable working level. Alrighty, now that we're back under the hood, let's put some blood back in this old girl. Now, I have found throughout the years, I have done enough of this on enough stuff that rarely ever do I get just enough oil to do what I'm doing. If I know what I need, I usually just go buy a case of it, because I'm probably going to do this again. And even if not for this thing, I know I'm going to have something else that requires the same stuff. And sometimes a lot of parts stores have like that deal, like if you buy so many quarts, like you get a free pan or a box of gloves or something. So usually it's more lucrative just to buy the case. And not to mention, whatever you don't use, just throw on the shelf. There's no such thing as having too much stuff. Now, I mentioned capacity earlier, and you guys may see here that I took a little paint marker and wrote down the oil filter number and the capacity for the engine oil in this car, right here on the valve cover. I know it's not the most aesthetically pleasing thing in the world, but I'm not taking this thing to car shows on the weekends and lifting the hood to let everybody see what's going on. This is for me. Now you guys take note, even over here on this passenger side core support here, I took a Sharpie and wrote down all of the headlight numbers. You know, here turn signal is 1157 NA, the low beam is an H11, the high is a 9005. That way, if something happens, I'm out on the road or whatever, and I see that I lose a light, I don't have to think about it. I just look at that, I know what it is, I run into O'Reilly's, Advanced Auto Parts, whatever, and then I just get what I need. It's not a guessing game anymore. Well, enough talking. Let's put some stuff in here. Now that we got everything ready to go, another little pro tip in case you guys did not know. oil quarts here. You notice how the neck is always offset to one side? That's not a coincidence. It's supposed to be like that. Now, you've probably seen, or probably even done yourself, that you put the neck there, the side of the bottle with the neck closest to it, and you pour from that way. That seems intuitive, right? Wrong. You flip it this way. Put the neck on top. That puts the majority of the oil down here in this corner. So whenever you're doing this, the air pocket stays on top, and you don't get that clog, clog, clog. You know, this makes this whole situation a lot easier. Trust me. Next time you're filling up anything with oil, the hole goes on top when you're pouring. So simply just take your time here. You see how nice that is? Because the hole is on top, and at the start of your pour, it's at the highest point of the jug. You don't get that like air suction thing, and it just pours really nicely the entire time. And you don't even need a funnel. This just works out great. Make sure you get every last drop out of this stuff. You know, this stuff's only going up in price like gasoline, so make sure you use all of it. 1 down, 3.5 to go. And finally, here we are at number 4.5. Just a little dribble more there. There you go, I'm comfortable with that. Throw the cap back on here, clean up any mess if you made any. And let's go ahead and spin this thing over. Let it run for a minute, let all that new fresh oil circulate, and then we'll come back and check the level with the dipstick. You guys hear all 13 of those horses in there? Let's just let this ride for a minute and get warm. Now, this is an extra little step that's completely unnecessary, but if we're taking the time to maintenance the vehicle, let's take the time to look it over. While this thing is just running here warming up, I grabbed myself a multimeter and set it to volts DC. This way, we can check the health of the alternator while this thing is running. So just go on over to your battery here, expose the terminals, red to red, black to black. Look at that. 14.4. And it's cycling up and down because the AC pump is turning on and off, but 14.5 volts. That lets me know that the alternator is doing its job, and now you have that confidence until next oil change that your alternator is doing good. We'll just reach in there and shut that thing off. Let it calm down for a minute, let all the oil drain back into the crankcase. Grab yourself a rag, pull out the dipstick, and the first time, don't pay attention to that first time. Wipe this thing off because it's still going to have a bunch of residue from the previous one. We're going to do this several times because you can never just trust it right off of the bat. Go ahead, put it in, make sure it's seated all the way. Pull it back out, take a gander. Right here, we are just above the bottom dot, meaning it's adequate, but it's not full. So we're going to go ahead and dump a little bit more into this thing and check it again until we hit that top dot and we know everything's good and full. Now that we put an extra little scotch of oil in there, same thing, pull this out, wipe it off the first time, never trust the first one. Go back in here, seat it. There you are. We are just below that top dot. It's not over full, it's not under full. We are right in that happy middle spot. Because being over full is just as bad as being under full. Well, maybe not just as bad, but then the PCV starts sucking oil and it's just a dirty, bad situation. You don't want that either. Make sure your level is correct. That's why it's crucial to make sure that this vehicle is level whenever you're checking this so you get a correct reading. Now, like I said, since we're in here, let's take a little time for maintenance. Have a little pride in your work. You know, we're in here, why not do it now? I just take myself a little bit of detailer or window cleaner, whatever you have. Just clean up some of these surfaces. You know, we may not be in here until next oil change, you know, God willing. So, it's just nice. Make sure everything's good and clean, because God forbid that you have a failure, an oil leak, or a coolant leak or a refrigerant leak or something, man, any tech will tell you it's miserable to find a leak if everything's already covered with oil and dirty. So the cleaner you keep your engine, not only does it look nice, and that's a plus, but it allows you to more easily find and diagnose issues if and when you run across it. So just take that little bit of time and clean up when you're done. Now that we're totally done under the hood, you know, simple stuff like if you want to fill up your washer fluid, now's the time to do that. Check the engine coolant, make sure everything's adequate. Now, I don't necessarily recommend pulling the cap off the radiator. I know a lot of these newer vehicles don't have an actual radiator cap anymore. It's just a pressure bottle off to the side, but they call it a pressure bottle for a reason. When the engine's hot, there's pressure in there. So make sure whenever you check your coolant, especially in a pressure system, make sure it's cool before you check the level. So, I mean, now's the time to check that. You can usually see through the side of the container if it's in an adequate level or not. Well, we are. So everything's good. We've checked the alternator. We've changed the engine oil and filter. You know, even check your air filter. This particular one, I already did it, so I know it's okay. But, you know, take your time. Do the stuff you need to do under here now so it doesn't shoot you in the foot whenever you're on that trip to Tennessee or something. So we're all done under here. Secure the prop if your vehicle has a prop. This one just does. And, make sure it's secured closed, both latches, not just the top one. Trust me, you'll figure that out. So now that we're all done under the hood, there's just one last little step that you definitely don't have to do. I've just gotten in the habit, so let's head on over to the bench. So the last little thing that I like to do is write myself a legit oil sticker for the windshield. So you see it, it's in your face the whole time. Yes, I know that you can set the service intervals on most vehicles. However, I just like to do this. I mean, yeah, you can reset it in your car. This is just a little old school, like, always, no matter what, it's going to be there kind of thing that I like to do. So we just simply rip off the old sticker and in with the new. Well guys, that about wraps things up for the lube oil filter here on the Family Truckster. Like I said beginning, I know this isn't exciting, but like I also said, we all have to do this for our first time at some point. So hopefully this helps somebody. I know this is a simple process, but it's nice to have it laid out for you systematically on video. So hopefully you guys enjoyed, and we'll see you guys next time.